be taking a look at medieval book clubs. If you like, please subscribe and share. Thank you. Appreciate that. So let's start by looking at a story called How the Irish Saved Civilization, the untold story of Ireland's heroic role from the fall of the Rome to the rise of medieval Europe. And essentially, it explains that when the fall of the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, because of the Justinian plague, or whatever atrocities went down, because there has been a number of plagues, and there are records of the 15th century and the 5th century plagues, which leads back to our calendar conversion that we'll talk about later. Also, the name Byzantine and Vizier and Byzantium are all correlated, which we'll get into later with the etymology of Tartarian words when we get into etymologies. So we're told that these rowboats, after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, brought all sorts of empire property to the west of Europe, where traders and merchants from specifically Ireland, the porters, were able to sell and trade this iconography, and the markets were filled with books from the Byzantine Empire and Rome, which were valued and were collected, and this led to the Renaissance and a rebirth of civilization because of astute learners who were surrounded in information. And this makes a certain amount of sense. We know that the keepers of information are educated, right? And they're better than other people, of course, because they learn things, and that's what it is that makes them so much better. Not. Anyway, so this is the crest of Carl Jung, and this is his family crest, which inspired him as a young boy to study symbols, because he wanted to know what the inherent value of these inherited symbols was that he had been given, and apparently had been correlated with a kingdom and with fantastical legacy of war. And there's a library and a castle, so you want to understand the background. But he ended up creating this, which was his own Carl Jung crest, and you'll see that it retracts the four-cornered flag into a three-layered flag, where there's a line of heaven in between the land, and the land is divided into the four corners and that which grows downwards and upwards, as above so below, which feeds off the sun and the earth, which is the perfect link of the torus. And above the head of the helmet is an angel holding grapes, which is then above lightning rods at the base of the name Carl Jung. So this gets into the idea of talismans and their magical power, and why people use medallions, and why they're so correlated, and why these symbols are the same so many places. For instance, the red shield of the Rothschilds, which you'll see it has the Tartarian, double-headed, Austro-Hungarian, Byzantine, Scottish Rite, double-headed eagle, or phoenix, holding in its hand the wand or scepter, and the ornament that represents this metaphysical realm, where you have a hollow sphere that is at a water level, and in the center is a magnetic cross. So further into the coat of arms, the Rothschilds, similarly, their more complex coat, which represents the five suns, has the four shields of the four corners of Europe, with a red shield in the center of it, representative of supposedly a very ancient shield in the center of the shield. However, what's strange about this shield is it's often represented as having horns, and then the centric disc shield looks very much like a money funnel to me. If you've ever seen a coin orbiter, you can put a coin in, and it comes out the center of a vortice. And if you know about fluid dynamics, what goes down also sends energy back up, out. So it's like a tornado. And so also, before we get deeper into why symbols are the way they are, let's look at the handheld arrows on both corners. So we have, it's a dragon and a phoenix, and then there's a griffin and a unicorn on either side. And the griffin and the unicorn, I would suppose, would be the most fantastical creatures representing Tartaria. And these hands are holding the arrows. And often we remember in the symbol of the empire that it was a bundle of arrows held together by themselves with string and making themselves into a tool. And it should probably cover woven braids, which are intricate, valuable tools that intertwine and interlock and save. And the Boy Scouts are not the only ones to use these. They're interestingly passed down by women very often. However, they're a legacy and a skill that are very useful, and to this day are often referred to as Turk-ish head knots, but I think we can say Tartarian head knots in 2019. So braiding a single rope, very important. Braiding is a very important skill. Here they're being held, and their weapons, they're pointed. They're very clearly for weapons, but they're pointed one down and one at the other, coming down. And the other one is not able to lift it up in time to defend itself. And there are 5 arrows in the hand, and this represents the capital as well as the nations and the kingdoms that are controlled. For instance, the dollar shows the American eagle holding 13 arrows. So shields have important meanings, crests have important meanings, and it goes back very far to the power of a witch named Medea. And Medea is also where we get the word media, medicine, Mediterranean, medallions. There are many more actually that you'll probably think of that I'm not mentioning right now. But Medea was a witch, and she was maybe more of a esoteric occult scientist. And this gets back into the idea of the Chinese, which symbol would they save, because they would make talismans by taking letters, removing the vowels, and turning the consonants into one symbol forward and backward. And you get a message that is hard to deconstruct, but you know what it means, and I call it encryption. It's sort of like a cryptology mixed into hieroglyphic symbols, because you don't necessarily have a full phoneme anymore, but there is representation of the consonants, which is sort of this inherent logic. If you think about the kiki and boba, sometimes straight lines and points like this arrow are thought of almost universally to represent kiki when they're asked which one is kiki and boba, and curves are representative of boba. So there is some sort of a logic to what sounds represent which symbols. In fact, that's why G and C come from right angles in Sumerian. And then Sumerian, of course, we'll get into later the phonemes of Tartaria, because the Sumerian alphabet's actually newer than Tartarian. And we have evidence of this. It's not, none of this is like without citation. There will be citation for all of these accusations and claims being made. However, in the meantime, let's look at the idea of the sigil and the crest and the talisman, and why it was important to these people that were hiding these meanings from other people, because they did not want everyone to understand them. And so they would set them up in a way that kept them safe to be seen in public and misunderstood. And so it's a form of magic. And a lot of people understand magic. And not everybody likes what they see. Although I like the POTUS in this picture, because he clearly knows what's going on and he's not too worried about it. But the people on either side of him are, because they can tell he's rocking boats. But there is power in symbolism that is not related necessarily to the observer. The audience might think that it's a mainstream Christian symbol, but the Vesca Pisces with the red cross. Coming out is Maitreya, or I'm sorry, for now I call him the Christ, but these represent an entirely older religion than what we've been told that they represent. The Vesica Pisces actually represents the two pillars coming together to create a portal. Between the two pillars are the site of God. There is a stage that is set up for worship with an altar, and the top of the pillars are just below God or the architect. And so on the other side, you can see that there are on top of the pillars spheres that are representative of the earth and of the stars. But it's the interior and the exterior. One is supposed to be the north and the south, or as above and so below, or inside or outside of the perspective. And within the two pillars is one portal into truth, because on either side of the portal is not truth. However, that divide falsehoods from the realm of truth. Between them is a center stage that is lit by the architect, between the sun and the moon. Above the pillars are two spheres, representative of the north and the south, or the interior and the exterior, the earth and the space, as inner space and outer space. However, above the pillars, they are able to see not only inside of the realm of the God stage, they're able to see above and out into the realm of falsehoods. It is only when they're able to see what each other are able to see that they are able to see the true light of the architect. And this is the portal, the one portal that is the truth. And according to what is truth? Truth is what can be seen by two parties. And the symbol is very old. We see that it's been used for sports. This is an Italian company, Fila, and the Etruscan alphabet is mirror backwards. So we have Aleph is the name of the Hebrew symbol that represents the two pillars, and we'll have a series a bit more on Hebrew geometry, but it also represents the Byzantine bird, because it's the two seers, the two whole seers, and we get the word Holy See from the Vatican's name, from being able to see, from being able to see outside the kingdom. So being able to see inside the grid is the aim of the architect and of a shared lens between the inner space and the outer space. And a view outside the pillars is a special, lucky thing for some, but it's also a curse for others if they want to know what they think of as an absolute truth that is true for both the inner and outer space realm. So the Holy See was responsible for taking a lot of this information. In fact, the Freemasons don't happen for hundreds of years until after the Catholic Church has banished the Jesuits, and the Jesuits have to start their own organization. So the Byzantine symbols became Catholic. And we know that the Catholic Church did not invent this symbolism, but for some reason we seem to attribute them to the Freemasons in the Enlightenment era. But we also know they studied Rosicrucian texts of Hermes, and that these are much older concepts. So it truly was a holy rowing empire that brought themselves to the information and then took the information elsewhere. They were conquest doers that took people, places, and things and shuffled them up. And you could not ever question this, or else you could end up in a lot of trouble. We landed on Plymouth Rock, and not that Plymouth Rock landed on us, as Malcolm X said. But who are we to argue with the finders of the New World and their manifest destiny? Because we would most likely be committed, or worse, considered witches and that has a worse route to take. But in the 19th century, it wasn't just that they put you at the stake, they put people in lunatic asylums. And lunatic, of course, means a lunar addict, someone addicted to the moon. And we now know that the symbol for the sun and the moon next to the giant symbol are the sun and the moon. The giant symbol is Saturn. And so these were Saturn addicts that were told to never mention Tartaria again. If they ever did, refer to it, of course, as the old country, and that it was bad a lot of the time. Also, and the old country. Call it the old country. Everywhere was the old country. So, in that milieu of global conflict, doesn't matter where you're from, that you experienced, you know, whether it be 260 days worth of asteroidal impacts and earthquakes and comets and devastations that lit up the sky and tore apart epic stone cities across the world, including Caracas and in Chile and in Colombia and in France and in Russia, where there were, by the way, earthquake in Spanish, called terremoto. Also, Krakatoa's Java events, you know, and the annihilation of Moscow, where a stone city was burned to brimstone. And they'll tell you about the wood structures in Russia, and there were wood structures, but that's not a wood bridge. We're just part of some sort of Napoleonic invasion, and that Napoleon was just this super complex guy. And that war with Eurasia, we've always been at war with East Asia, or, I mean, who amongst us can remember what it was like before and what the narration was before the 1790s and 1830s, because it's all been erased. And this gets us into this concept of Paris syndrome, which I thought sounded crazy until I actually went to Paris. And it only works on certain kinds of people. Apparently it's very common on Japanese and on students. And what happens is, when you've studied Paris and you actually know about Paris, Paris does not make any sense. It's not, the actual Paris is not like the studies of Paris. The place does not add up to interpretation. And of course, you're supposed to throw away your studies, right? And then believe what you see. I hope. Well, so Plymouth Rock landed on us, and it's a great story, really, the way it's told by people that are knowingly supposed to be liars. Anyway, that they escaped from the Dark Ages. And imagine for a second that you're in the Dark Ages. You know, it's whether it's real or not. Just close your eyes. You're in the dark, and it's dirty, and there's no lights when you open them. Everything's covered in mud. There's no plumbing. And so you go and you find a book club. And the book clubs are cool. There are men's associations, fraternal lodges that are well lit at night. They're clean. And they have meetups. They have maker spaces. They have a fab lab, tech shops, lodges that are full of information from all over the world. And they're collecting more information all the time. And some of these guys are even making their own works about these works to explain the works that are too old to be understood. And from them are steam machines coming out and interesting contraptions. Brilliantly, they rediscovered the secrets of the pyramids. Except, where are all those new pyramids? Except for the Louvre and, you know, the glass hollow pyramids, and, you know, they're not the same thing. So, like, there was an era of Rosicrucianism in the 1650s that we're told happened, where the Cathars took this information that they had been saving from ancient Egypt and Sumeria and Hermes, and they learned so much about how it mattered that they forgot the dreams inside their own heads, and they started emulating and making statues and architecture to the gods, temples to the gods of other people. Which Andrea Palladio, he either stole it and described it, and I think he's a great example of one of these lodge dissertationists, and it seems like pretty obvious that's the official story anyway. He isn't supposedly a creator of this architecture. He's simply a chronicler. The Andrea Palladio was a student of the works of Vitruvius, or by TRUBIA, whom is also the origin of the Vitruvian Man, or Vitruvian Man, of Leonardo da Vinci, who was a proponent of his works as well. Now, as you've heard me say, Truvia, Vitruvia, think of this piece of Trubian trivia, which there is a Spanish city called Trubia that is a Spanish Gothic city in the Spanish state of Asteria or Bisteria. And it was a 19th century colonial industrial factory town known for their Trubia tanks, the homemade tanks, supposedly, of the Spanish Civil War. And these tanks were phenomenal pieces of machinery that led to, after the capture by nationalist troops, the creation of the Panzer tank, which was one of many weapons that came out of the Trubian factories. Trubia has the architecture, it has the technology, it's Vitruvia. So, Vice-Rubia, or the Western Byzantine Empire, the Western Roman Empire, Vice Tartaria. That gets us into the Spanish Habsburg Empire. And España, I thought as a child, meant the bread, right? Espan, but it doesn't, and there's some sort of Iberian etymology to refer to a stone or bronze and metalworking advanced civilization, which is an interesting, and I think we're gonna pick it up from here next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Like I said, if you enjoyed, please click the like button and share and subscribe. It helps a lot. Also, any questions and comments, I am doing my best to answer, and in certain cases I'm actually just answering by making more videos. So thanks a lot. See you guys next time.